Hello and welcome to another episode of Linux in Code. We are finishing up today the user validation, input, and sanitation. Let's go ahead and get right into it. We left off right in the middle of read last time. Let's go. That leaves us with one route left in read, but unfortunately it has a lot going on. So we have a couple of things here. We have our query, we have our filter, we have our sort, we have our order by. There's a lot of properties here that we're dealing with. Okay, so what we need to do here is iterate over all of these different query parameters that we're giving ourselves to deal with. And we can't really explicitly do it like we did down below because we aren't necessarily sure what any of these are going to be or even if they're going to be there. So we have to be pretty careful with that. So let's go ahead and iterate over what we know. And we can do that by working with the query object, but it's an object, not an array, so our filter has to be a little bit different. So we're going to say our const escaped query is going to be equal to object dot assign, which is a way of creating a new object because we don't really want to modify our request query. And it's going to start out empty, and then the source of it is going to be our old object, which we're going to get all of the properties for by doing the spread operator, the ES6 syntax if you're not familiar with it, and then object dot keys. And now we have to give it the object that we want to get the keys from, which in our case is our query from our request. And now we can map on this. And here we can write just like it was an array. So now we're going to have our object key. And with that key, we can do our dynamic construction like we've done before, where we say our OB key is equal to something. Now you could also escape the key value, but since down below we only do things with values we're expecting, and that means we don't really have to care about somebody passing in a garbage query parameter because we don't do anything with it. We don't directly pass the whole query in. So now that we have our dynamic key set up, we need to do our actual validation. So validator.escape, and we're going to get our object that we passed in here. And so that's going to be our req.query. And now we need to reference it by the key that we are currently on. And that gives us the value of that particular key. So now that we have that, we're validating it. And this is complaining right here because we need to wrap it one more time. Oops, I did that wrong. We need one more closing bracket. And actually, I think we can remove that return as well, but we'll leave it for now. So we're up and running with no errors. So this should iterate over all of our objects. So now we're going to escape. And essentially anywhere here where we're referencing req.query, we're not going to anymore. I'm going to speed this this up a little bit. Except I'm basically done now. So there's one other thing that we need to do, because this is expecting everything to be a string. If it's not a string, not nice things are going to happen, and the validator will get angry with us. But what that means is this number that we are expecting to be an actual number is getting passed to a string, which could in some cases throw this off here. So what we're actually going to do is say parse int just for this specific value. Now, we're going to double check the rest of our values to make sure we're not referencing anything else, and there's one more that we need to replace. So we'll go ahead and do that. And now this should still work exactly how it did before. So nothing should be broken, which is a tall order. So we're here on our read. We have one that already has some sort by username and order ascending applied. So let's go ahead and run this and see if we still get a result. We do. It works. That's great. So let's go ahead and throw something garbage in here on username, like a $, for example. That should actually still go through. It does. However, other symbols that aren't valid, like this, should get escaped. So this is still just returning our list because we have defaults set up. Now, let's go ahead and put something else in here. Like a filter. And let's pass it a regular expression, which shouldn't get parsed by us. It should end up just searching for the escaped version of the slash and the letters that we've typed. And as you can see, we get nothing back because that doesn't match anything. But if we get rid of those slashes, now we get our name back. So that's working exactly how we want to. Let's go ahead and go back to our index and check on update. Update, it looks like, is pretty small and maybe even just requires the same validation that we did on our get by ID. So that sounds like something we can copy paste. So we'll grab the validator and we'll come down here to what we did for this. But we also have an entire body to validate here. This becomes a little bit more tricky because now we have to do the same thing that we did for our query, but on body. But that's not a big deal because we've already written that functionality. So we're just going to take this same code and instead of doing it on the query, we're going to do it on the body. We need to change that in one other place. And this might be something we want to extract to a helper function later, but we're not to that point yet. So this, it needs to be our user ID, and this needs to be our escape query. And that should be it. So we already have an ID of a user over here. And actually we have the entire user object. So let's just grab that whole thing. let's see, where do we have a put on user? Right here. So I don't think Tom still exists. So we're going to first get this ID. Get that in there. And then we're going to drop in this entire document. And we're going to just do an update to the username. We're just going to get rid of the S off of the last name and send that request. And we got back the updated document, which is exactly what we want. Now we already know that it's filtering correctly because we're working everything off of that new object. So I could sit here and do the same tests for invalid characters and everything, but I won't waste your time with that. Okay. That's all we do in update. What about delete? I believe that's our last route that we have left. It is. So this one only takes an ID. So again, we can use this function. And we can just replace this. And we know we're set. Now that's all for user. We're gonna do the same thing to item, but we're gonna probably cover that in another episode because this has already run really long. So thanks for watching. Let me know if you wanna see a separate episode on the item property validation. It's gonna look almost identical to this, so we may not bother. But thanks for watching, hope you enjoyed. Let me know if there's something else that you wanna see me cover. Take care.